What's up? Welcome back. I'm John Stark from AcTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and today we're talking about Screams from the Tower. This is debuting on video on demand on April 14th, 2026. So you can get your fix immediately. It went through the film festival circuit in 2024, from what I'm able to uncover online. I went to Midwest Film Festival, Toronto LGBTQ Film Festival, where it won a prize, and now 2 years later is gaining a release through TLA, and it was passed to me for my consideration as a gay film critic, and not as a blind one because it's in the audio description, but uh, so 90s. The 90s were a weird time, and we're going to explore that through LGBTQ culture. So the film wants to be a lot of things. It's a time capsule back to the 90s, although as a 90s kid, I didn't really feel like it was a 90s movie. Um, Maybe because I didn't grow up with a radio station at my high school, so I couldn't relate. um, the closest thing I had was we did have sort of like the student run news or whatever, but we had to pre-produce all of our segments, and it ran like once a week. So we had like all week to develop our segments for it, and then it just ran at one point. I can't remember what day of the week, but one point during, I don't know, homeroom type stuff, it was like, bam, there you go. There's your student news. No, I definitely didn't have a radio station to be able to sit there and have call-ins and stuff like that. That would have been cool. But this school has it, and this school has LGBTQ culture to it that is a little bit more out and proud, especially for the 90s. Again, something I didn't grow up with. Um, the it's not the inability to relate to it. It's also sort of in and around the vibes and the promotional material is, there's a little bit of that comparison to the Breakfast Club, which is a tall order, and also to John Hughes, which is also a tall order. And I'm not saying John Hughes got everything right. He definitely has some moments in his career which have not held up slash reflected well. I still think, not being an 80s kid, it's weird to watch a film where every time an Asian character enters the room, it's followed by a gong. I don't think that aged well. But uh, Breakfast Club is iconic. And one of the things that makes John Hughes' films, and honestly a lot of teen films, especially from the 90s, so the thing I think, oddly enough, one of the things that it's missing is the same thing I pegged another movie for recently called Forbidden Fruits, and it's the lack of a soundtrack. And I know that this kills like independent films because they can't tap into the, having like, ooh, we'd like to drop Lady Gaga here, but we can't because putting a Lady Gaga song here would be expensive. Um, there's never been more music available widely across various platforms. It's not about making sure that you have all of the greatest hits. If anything, it's about finding that beat and that rhythm. And if you have someone who is like a music supervisor that can really bring in the kind of hot talent that feels of this film, you know what I'm saying? Like feels like of a pop, kind of almost like a gay pop rock vibe to it. Something a little. It doesn't have to be the iconic artists. I don't need certain artists from the time period. Um, I think if you explore it a little bit more, you can find a fresh take on a hot soundtrack. But I mean, think about just Breakfast Club and how iconic, don't you forget about me, that song. I mean, it's just, I, some of these movies, as you get tied into the music, they end up having uh, one or two hot songs in it that really end up uh, working for the film. And the 90s definitely had, moments that were backed by some song. Of course, Cruel Intentions would be one of them, which famously has at least one song attached to it that I think anybody who's seen Cruel Intentions, anytime you hear it, yeah, that's Cruel Intentions. Um, so that's maybe it's very weird. It's a film and it doesn't really have a score either. It has flashes of score to it, but it doesn't really have it kind of lingers in its thing. I feel like as a teen pop film, you know what I'm saying? Like the kind of I feel like that was what was lacking, but I also felt that with Forbidden Fruits. It's like why is there no Forbidden Fruits felt like it had a score. Didn't mean I didn't like the movie, but it does kind of um, feel like a film that it was unfinished and hoping to be picked up by a studio to where the studio would then pay for a soundtrack. But there are indie artists. There's got to be people who are willing to get their uh, music into a film who are still making great content. It just requires having somebody with a little bit of patience to find out what that music is and acquire it on the cheap and at least have that flavor to it. So I just don't. I think that was one of the things that's been missing from a couple of movies. Are those iconic? It's very like it's a tough thing to throw at an indie film because I know why they're not doing it, but at the same time, I think in this day and age when people are just making music using ChatGPT, and you have artists who are becoming legitimately famous without ever going through a record label because they can upload their music straight to Apple Music and Spotify. I think there's gotta be stuff out there. There have to be artists, who are asking for ridiculous amounts of money and whose music is good enough to give the movie the kind of vibe and that this needs. It's a fun gay comedy at times. um, it's hard to say that I fully related to it in the teen comedy vibe, um, but the best moments were so the school in here. This is a terrible review. Subscribe. The stream of consciousness. Welcome. So the film takes place in this high school where they have the radio station and they're trying to get on the radio and they want to make sure that they get. So they have to kind of finagle their way and smooth talk and sweet talk their way into getting a time slot, which they eventually do. And once they do, I thought the radio show was endlessly entertaining. I thought that was the best part of the show. But it's interesting how it like tests their friendship and they keep getting these warnings. Um, but I thought their banter was great. The writing really pops in and around those segments where it doesn't pop quite as much. They become like the world's greatest radio hosts. And I loved how their banter back and forth I felt like was unique and fresh and like this is what we were waiting for, right? Like this is the screams from the tower portion is sort of like what you're waiting for in this movie to happen. So in and around that, uh, supporting characters, there's a decent ensemble here full of people. I really like the lunch lady. I thought she was great, and when she gets the opportunity to be on their show, she's got a killer voice. Um, just singing her ass off, but uh, it has a hard time dealing with some of the issues. It has a sort of an unrealistic vibe. They go a little bit into the concept of like a Sadie Hawkins dance, right? And how old hat it is to for girls to ask guys out. And I'm like, well, that seems to suggest that girls can't ask guys to other dances. Why not? You know. So there's commentaries thrown in sporadically, but there's also one where they're trying to produce the show later in the game. This is sort of a spoiler, but I need to talk about the scene because it bothered me. And the kid is obviously has a really regressive parent in the household in terms of where they stand with LGBTQ culture or the existence of LGBTQ people. And basically, their existence is threatened. And so they have to back out of the show. And their friend reacts in a way that's sort of unrealistic, considering what is being told, like in the rock and a hard place situation. It's not quite rock and hard place. It's kind of like it's pretty obvious that uh, short short term gains versus long term gains. So um, the threat of the other stuff that they would lose should they continue to do the show. Not even should they continue to be a part of the culture, but should they continue just to do the show. So the reaction, the fact that they're like, "Oh, we have to do this. We're never gonna do it." It's like I get that when you're in high school, you're like, "I'm never gonna do anything greater than that." But also the in this moment, this kid is saying, "Well, this is my future. This is my college. This is everything. So I have to. If I don't do this, then I don't go to college. I don't do these other things." Seeing screams from a tower is just going to be this blip in their life. It's very there's both of it, but I just didn't like the discourse between the friends. I thought at some point that they would have that would have been a moment of understanding for them. Maybe it would have hurt, but it would have sucked. But the way that the other friend reacted just it didn't hit me right, because it's like, so if that was flipped back on you and your college was being threatened and to be taken away, you'd just be like, yeah, fuck, I'm gonna do it anyway. Take my college away. I don't need it. I'm gonna become a radio star because people are listening to my high school radio station. So, just a couple little things like that. But I thought the cast was charming, just in general across the board. The two leads, who are actors I don't know. Honestly, this is an indie cast full of a whole bunch of people, which is always fun and engaging when you find a talented indie cast, like people who really just kind of float under the radar. They've done some things. They've been in a couple films, short films, films you've never heard of, Hallmark movies. They guest starred on a TV show one time, but it wasn't a memorable role. So, like those kind of credits, when those kids end up popping up and carrying the movie. I thought the two leads here were really fun. Um, the two main characters and the ensemble around them is not bad. There's nothing here where I was like, oh, the acting isn't bad. It feels like an indie film that came up through. I'm surprised it didn't go to more film festivals. I'm surprised that it didn't float around a little bit more, that it didn't hit the zeitgeist a little bit more. I'm surprised it took 2 years for this movie to come out. All of those things are true, but do I think it's like iconic? Do I think it hit that? No, I think it's the kind of film that you put out and a studio touches up, sort of like what Neon did to Shelby Oaks, but maybe not. I don't know if this film needed a full million. I think this film just, you know what I'm saying? Like, they basically gave him more than what he spent, or as much as he spent the first time on it. So, um, but it's one of those films that you just fill in. You go, okay, well, let's get you a soundtrack. Let's get you out there and push it. Like, why couldn't this have been Bottoms? Why? Because because you don't recognize that doesn't make any sense. So I don't know. I feel like it just needed a tiny bit of TLC, and it got TLA instead. Which is it's fine, whatever. I mean, it's getting released. It's out there. It's not. There are definitely other studios that would have distributed it and just like a fart into the wind, from Quiver, whatever. Um, but I I think it's gonna get buried. I think it's just gonna get lost among the sea of films. This could have benefited from a streaming release, so at least it would have seemed sort of like Pizza Movie at Hulu, where at least there's some profile being given to it. But it doesn't even have. The weird thing is, it didn't even get a theatrical release, so this isn't even. Like, I feel like if I went out into the street and tried to find somebody who saw I Wish You Well, that they would have no idea what that was. And that went to theaters. Like, that had a theatrical release date and everything, and has a couple more recognizable cast members within it than this one does. So if people don't know what that gay coming of age movie was from November, I just don't know who I'm going to be talking to about Screams from Tower until it starts floating streaming services and then becomes a film that oddly pops, that people just find. I saw Downriver as a screener, and then suddenly it was on Amazon. It started trending, and I was like, "What is happening? How did this happen for this movie?" But the weirdest things can happen for certain films, and I do wish this film all the best. I think it has a fun script, not perfect. It's a little uneven. I think it has aspirations. I would avoid comparing yourself to anything and just say, I'm an homage to a time period in which I grew up in. I'm guessing Corey Wexler Grant is probably in and around my age group as the director. If not, it's weird that he's doing a love letter to a generation he's not from, in a time period he didn't grow up in, and just so. But yeah, I'm guessing that's what this is. So lean in on that and just be yourself. And yeah, I would avoid any sort of comparisons to other films because I don't think this film is like anything else. There was nothing while I was watching it where I was like, oh yeah, I guess Bonds just through the LGBTQ angle of it, but I struggled to find like an exact comparison because it doesn't feel 90s. It doesn't feel like it's so starkly contrasting in terms of its nostalgic vibe where they're trying to bring out the 90s, where they're talking about things, like where it's like super awkward because they're like, hey guys, I got a new slap bracelet, or I would, but I have to feed my Tamagotchi. I mean, like, it's not leaning in on our pop culture nostalgia. Like, oh, where is my Trapper Keeper? Where is it? So, uh, it's, why did you bring your Tickle Me Elmo with you to school? It's not dripping with that kind of thing, or collections of Beanie Babies. They're not like talking about trading Beanie Babies or anything like that. So I'm trying to think of all the like weird shit we had in the '90s. Um, so because it's leaning more into this really specific, like this is a school, this is suburbia, this is clearly a nice school where kids don't have to worry about too much. They have a radio station. They get to be themselves, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, just it has its own vibe. I like the film. Uh, did I love it? No, but I did like it. So, audio description, not audio description. It's mostly dialogue driven anyway. it got a little confusing in following supporting cast that just weren't in the film enough to be able to track their voice. They also do some stuff later on with that like chipmunk voice that sort of irritated me just from a non-visual standpoint of being able to follow that conversation. I was like, well, now I've learned how the voices, but if you're just gonna talk like Alvin and the Chipmunks, then you know, but no, there's so many cute moments in here. Um, just little things that they find to talk about on their show. Those were the moments. I kind of wish that hadn't been the whole show. It was just them sort of in this room, just doing show after show, and maybe like in between having like a scene, and then they're like, oh, back to the other show. um, so yeah, I'd recommend it. Yeah, Screams from Tower definitely deserves to be seen over some other films. So I'm gonna give Screams from Tower. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. So there you go. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you guys on the other side.